Hello students. Today let us start with the first chapter in history, a period of transition. Now, you must be knowing that history is classified into three periods, that is, the ancient, the medieval and the modern period. And each of these periods have its unique features. That means many changes and development has taken place in these periods throughout the world. Now, you also must know that these periods differ from country to country. For example, in India, the medieval period began in the 9th century and lasted till the 18th century, whereas in Europe, it lasted from the 5th century to the 15th century. Now, towards the beginning of the 14th century, a big movement of change began in Europe, and that is Renaissance. Now, before we learn or we get to know what is Renaissance, let us know how we got to know the information, the sources that marked the end of the medieval period and the beginning of the modern age. So what were the sources that tells us about this modern period? The sources are broadly divided into primary sources and secondary sources. In the primary sources, we have original document. Now, what is original document? These were the records that was kept by the British officials or the European officials. Then we have historical works, the histories written by contemporary historians. The artistic work, the paintings, sculptures, pictures, designs. Then we have different types of sketches, drawings. All that are different sources. Newspapers that was published during that period. It could be in English or any other languages. Photographs, videotapes, audio tapes, interviews of important personalities, filming of very important experiences or incidents in history. Accounts of travelers. You must be knowing that many students or scholars have traveled to different places, different countries in order to study about the philosophy, about their religion, about the way they live, their culture. So these travelers have left a detailed account of what they have observed, the changes that have taken place in those times, in those countries. And lastly, the archaeological sources. Archaeological sources refers to the artifacts that was found during those times, the monuments that was built during those times. So this primary sources was like the first-hand information. And what is secondary sources? Secondary sources are reviews, reports, articles. The reports and the reviews that was written by the historians, by analyzing the work of these historians, by analyzing the primary sources. They did a deep research, a study on the primary sources and arrived conclusion. After interpreting the data, they arrived at conclusion and formed the secondary sources. So these are the different sources that tells us about Renaissance. Now let us learn what is Renaissance. Renaissance is a French word which is derived from a Latin word meaning rebirth. Rebirth or revival. Revival of cultural beliefs. Revival of art, literature, philosophy, science, religion and politics. Renaissance began in Italy, but it had its impact all over the world. It first began in Italy, but then it spread to all over Europe. Let us learn now what were the causes that led to this Renaissance, or what were the reasons that led to this Renaissance. The first important cause was the fall of Constantinople. You must have learned in the 7th standard about the city of Constantinople, ruled by Constantine, and then in 1453 it was attacked by the Turks. So this place, Constantinople, was a main center or the famous center of learning. It had very large libraries which contained manuscripts written by many famous Greek and Roman writers. So in the year 1453, when Constantinople was invaded by the Turks, the scholars, the students, they fled from there with their work and they went to different parts of Europe. There were many scholars who entered Italy, and after some years they opened their school in Florence, that is in Italy. Now many historical work which was not known to anyone in the world were read by many people. They started reading, developed the interest of reading, and they tried to understand their life and change their attitudes towards life. So that was the first cause. Secondly was the rise of new nobility or decline of feudalism. Now Europe, you must be knowing, followed a feudal system where the society was divided into the king, which was at the highest position, the nobles, the vassals, the merchants, and then the peasants. Now because of the fall of Constantinople, the feudalism declined and many changes took place after that. The first important change was that the peasants who were exploited, they were now free. They received freedom. They had their own rights. So they started thinking, and this led to a reawakening in their society. Second important thing that happened after the decline of feudalism, there was a new class of nobles. The nobles were actually not nobles by birth, but they were merchants. But since the trade increased, the importance of this class increased, and there was a new class of nobles. And these nobles encouraged trade. Along with trade, they also encouraged learning, art, literature. So this was the second cause of Renaissance. The third is discovery of new routes. Now, since Constantinople was occupied by the Turks, and this Constantinople was a link between the Europe and the East for the trade, they had to find out new routes to other countries in the East. It was necessary to find out or discover new routes. So there were many who started with long voyages. They went on long voyages to discover new places for trade. Now when they went on these voyages, they exchanged their culture with the others. That means if they had started from Europe to the Middle East countries, there was exchange of cultural beliefs, ideas, religion. So this also brought the Renaissance in Europe, and then this spread to the other countries in Europe. The next cause was the Crusades or the Holy Wars that was fought to save Christianity from the Turks. Now when they went for these Holy Wars, they also exchanged their ideas. They went to these Arab countries where there was advancement of science and philosophy. So when they came back, when they returned to their homeland, they brought their ideas and people started reading about these philosophers, these scholars, these scientists. Some of the important scholars of those times or the philosophers of those times were Plato and Aristotle. So people began reading about these scholars or these philosophies, and this changed their attitude towards their life, towards the universe. And lastly, the most important, invention of printing press. This was the most important factor that led to Renaissance. Before the invention of printing press, the books were manuscripts, that means they were handwritten. So they had to copy page to page, and this would take a lot of time, and sometimes the errors in the books would occur, and the price of these books was quite high. After the invention of press, books were printed in thousands, and it was distributed among all the people in Europe. People started reading, understanding. The holy book, that is the Bible, also was printed in this time. And the person who has contributed to this is Johannes Gutenberg. He was the one who has invented the printing press. And because of this contribution, people could actually read and try to understand about their life. So these were the main causes that led to Renaissance, that brought the awakening in Europe. Now, since we know the causes, let us try to understand what were the features of this Renaissance. The first important feature of Renaissance period was humanism. Now, you must be knowing that in the medieval period, religion played a very important role. Everything was under the control of religion. But the Renaissance scholars or the thinkers were humanistic. What is this humanistic? That means these scholars gave importance to human values, human worth, human dignity, which was not found in that period. So these humanists believe that a man is an active body, an active mind. So he is capable of knowing, learning and controlling the world. They gave importance to human dignity, to human experiences. They gave importance to human happiness. They gave importance to the life of the individual, the freedom of the individual, and also to their rights. The second feature was rationalism. The Renaissance thinkers were also rationalists, which means reasoning. They tried to reason out each and every phenomena. They questioned. They did not accept blindly whatever was said to them or whatever was written in the books. They even questioned the authority of the church. So they reasoned out each and every knowledge that was brought to them. They were rationalistic in nature. This led to scientific spirit in the people. They started using a different method of observation, experimentation and scientific explanation. Now what did they do? They observed, critically understood the matter, the phenomena, and then arrived at conclusion. So they used a scientific method of observation and experimentation. This developed in them the spirit of inquiry, inquiring, questioning, asking, and then this inquiry led to the discovery of many things in Europe. Lastly, realism was another feature of Renaissance. Realism or the Renaissance thinkers were realistic in nature. They gave importance to human expression, and this is best understood when we see the artwork, the artistic work of the Renaissance thinkers. So, in today's class, we have learned about the different types of sources that tells us about the Renaissance period, the causes that led to Renaissance, and the features of Renaissance. In the next class, we are going to learn about its impact. Thank you.